Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video we're going to be learning about the all-new Tailwind Just-in-Time Mode. So then, pretty recently Tailwind has introduced this new feature called the Just-in-Time Mode, which is a compiler that generates your styles on demand as you author or build out your templates instead of generating everything in advance at the initial build time. Now, not only is this going to heavily improve your development performance, it also comes with some cool new features. So here on the documentation for this mode or feature, if we scroll down, we can see some of the highlighted advantages or features. So the first thing here is we have every variant is enabled out of the box. So variants such as focus visible, active, and disabled, which normally are enabled by default due to file size considerations, are now enabled by default. So that's pretty cool. Now the next thing here is the ability to generate arbitrary styles without writing custom CSS. Now, I've actually run into this issue a few times with Tailwinds where their example here for the background image is exactly the issue I had, where I wanted to be very specific with where I wanted to position this image, and we really don't have that ability within Tailwind without writing some custom CSS, but we no longer have to do that as we can use what they call the square bracket notation to achieve something like this here, which I have highlighted, where we can define the top, we can say dash, and then we can use square bracket notation here to enter a pixel amount that we want to specifically align this image or this example here from the top. So we can say negative 113 pixels. And I believe this works with other things as well, such as padding, margin, and font size. And if we scroll down here in the documentation, I believe it'll show us that as well. All right, and then we also have, like I mentioned, better performance in development since we aren't going to have that huge pre-generated CSS file. We're only going to be generating what we need based on our HTML file. Okay, and that is pretty much the highlight. If we scroll down here within the documentation for this mode, we have how we can enable this, which we'll cover within this video. And there's a lot of other new features that we aren't going to cover, but I recommend you or encourage you to check out the documentation to see exactly what may benefit you inside of your project. Now, to demonstrate this just-in-time mode, we're going to be building something practical, which is going to be this modern landing page from Front End Mentor. Now, before we begin, if you are looking for the starting files for this project, they're going to be hosted over here on Front End Mentor. Now, there'll be a link down below in the description to get to Front End Mentor. And in order to download the starting files, you're going to need to create a free account, which is very easy to do. And I highly recommend it as I have a ton of free challenges, just like you're going to see here today that we're building to offer that are going to improve your front end development skills. So definitely recommend creating an account, and then you'll be able to download the starting files here. So what this is going to include are the assets or the images that we're going to be using here within our modern landing page. And it's also going to include all of the content that we're going to be using to populate this landing page. All right. Now, if you're looking for the finished version of this project, I do have a repo over here on GitHub that is going to contain our finished version minus the assets here. All right. So to download this, what you need to do is make sure you're on the master branch. Now, what I also did is create different chapters here for each section that we have within this video. All right. So if you want to start on a specific section or chapter, you can download or click on this branch and then download the code. And to download the code, what you need to do is click on this code button right here, and then you want to download the zip and then open up that zip, or you want to extract that zip first and then open up that folder in your text editor of your choice. So since we're going to be installing Tailwind via NPM, you need to ensure that you have Node.js installed on your system. Now, if you're unsure if you have this installed, what you can do is you can open up a terminal if you're on Mac or command prompt on Windows and run the command node-v. And if you have Node installed, you should get a return version here, as I do currently, which is 17.1.0. Now, if you don't get that, what you need to do is I have a link down below in the description, which will take you to nodejs.org, and you want to download and install the latest version before continuing on with this tutorial. Alright, so here in VS Code I have a new folder called tailwinds-jit, and inside of here I've extracted a few things from our starting files download over on Front End Mentor, and that is this assets folder here, which has all the assets we need for our landing page, and also this HTML file called content, which has all the markup or text that we're going to need to populate our landing page with. Okay, so we aren't going to need this for now, so let's close this out. And let's begin by opening up a terminal here. Now, the first thing that we need to do is create a new package.json. So let's run the command npm init-y, and that should generate a package.json here. So now that we have this, let's head over to Tailwinds, and we want to copy this command right here to install Tailwinds into our project. So we'll copy this, and then we will paste it in here. And then once this is done running here, if we go to our package.json, we should see that we have this dependency here of Tailwind. So the current version at the time I recorded this video is 2.2.19. Okay, so now that we have this installed, let's click on the Get Started button here. And let's go to the installation section, and we're going to scroll down here because we still need to do a few things. And the next thing I want to do is we are going to be adding some customization into our Tailwinds project here, or this tutorial. So we want to create a configuration file, and you can see right here to do this we can run the command npx tailwinds init, and that'll create this minimal or pretty blank config file here for us. So let's head back to our project and let's copy and paste this in here, and you should see now that's generate this blank or template of our config file. So for now we'll leave the file as it is. We'll come back to configuring it in a few moments. So what we want to do next is head back over to the documentation, and we need to include Tailwind in our CSS. So we need to create a CSS file because we don't have one already, and we want to use the @tailwind directive to inject Tailwind's base, components, and utility styles into our project. So let's copy these three directives here, and let's head back over to our project. So we'll create a new folder called src, and then we'll create a new CSS file within this folder, and we'll call it style.css. And then all we want to do is paste these into this file and save it. Now the next step here is to build our CSS. Now to do this within this video, we're going to be creating a script within our package.json to handle this. So inside of our package.json, let's create a new script, and we'll just remove this test one, and we'll call this script build::tailwinds. Okay, and inside of our quotes here, let's create our script, and we want to say tailwind build, and we want to declare an input folder, which is going to be our source and our style sheet. So we'll say src/style.css, and we want to output this somewhere. Now we haven't created this yet, but we can define where we want to output this to, and we're going to create a new folder called public, and we'll have a style sheet in there called style.css. Okay, now all we need to do is run this script, and it should build our CSS inside of a folder called public, and then the file style.css. So let's run this command, npm run build tailwinds here. And if we did this correctly, let's see here, it looks like it's frozen or something. Let me try to fix this. Alright, so not sure what happened there. It seemed to freeze up on us. So let's give this a try once more. We'll say npm run build tailwinds here, and there we go. You can see now our script has ran successfully, and we can see we have this public folder here, and once the script has finished, we should see all of the styles that we imported here, such as our base styles, our component styles, and our utility styles here within this public folder. And if we open up this style sheet, you can see here that we have all those now imported into our project. Alright, with that completed, we now have access to use Tailwind within our project. So let's begin by creating a new HTML file here within our folder, and we'll call this index.html, and we'll generate a new boilerplate using Emmet, and let's give this file a proper title, and we'll say Tailwind JIT here. Now in order for us to use the styling or the classes from Tailwind within this file, we first need to link up our style sheet here from our public folder. So we'll do that inside of the head tag, and we'll say link, and we'll navigate to our public folder, and we'll grab this style.css file. Okay, Now with that implemented, we should have access to use the styling here within this file. So let's generate some markup inside of the body tag. We'll start off by creating a div with the class of container and then also MX auto to center everything. And then inside of here, we'll have an H1 and we'll give it a font size of a little bit larger. So we'll say 4XL, and then we'll give it a font color. So we'll pass text and we'll do gray and we'll go 500. And then for the value, we'll just say hello from JIT mode. All right. And then let's do a paragraph tag here and let's apply some classes. So let's just say a little bit larger font from the normal. We'll do LG for large, and then we'll pass it a font color of gray and we'll do 300. And we'll say hello from JIT again. Okay, so there we go. We have some markup with some classes from Tailwind generated here. So let's preview this inside of our browser to make sure everything is working properly. So to preview this, I'm going to be using a extension from VS Code called Live Server. And if I right click on the file here, we can open this up with Live Server. And as you can see, we have our markup here with the proper styling from Tailwind. So if I inspect this just to reassure, we can see if I inspect this here, we have our container, which has the margin, or sorry, the container is the max width, and then the MX auto is going to push it to the middle by setting the margin on the left and right to auto. And then if we go to the H1, we can see that we have the text 4XL, which is the font size and line height, and then we have our color class here. Okay, so everything is seeming to work. Now, currently at this moment, we are importing the entire Tailwind library to use, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different classes within our HTML file here, which isn't very ideal. And if we take a look at the network tab and I do a refresh here, you can see we have the style sheet right here. And if I hover over this, you can see the current size of this is 4 megabytes, which is quite large. And this is where we're going to be using the just-in-time mode to reduce this so that we don't import the entire library, we only import the 6 classes that we're using. So let's head back over to our project and begin to implement the just-in-time mode. Okay, back here on the Tailwind's documentation, we can see exactly how to enable the just-in-time mode for our project, and it's quite easy to do. Now, within our Tailwind configuration file that we created earlier on within this video, we want to set the mode option here to JIT, and that will enable the just-in-time mode for our project, so pretty easy. Now, in addition to this, what we also want to do is set up our purging. Now, since we're going to be using the just-in-time mode, if we don't set up the purging here, our CSS will be empty, and we don't want that. All right, so let's head back over to our project and open up the Tailwind configuration. And right above purge, we'll set mode and we'll set this to JIT. All right, and that's going to enable the just-in-time mode. So like I said, pretty easy. Now for the purging, we want to target every HTML file that we have within our project here. Now we only have one, but in the event that you have multiple, this will go ahead and target all of them. So we'll say asterisk here, so we're in the root, and we're going to target all the files that have the extension of, and we forgot the dot here, .html. All right, so now if we open up our terminal, we can rerun our build command here of Tailwinds, and this will pick up on the newly added configuration here. And as you can see, we have enabled the just-in-time engine, which currently is in preview, and it was done compiling in 154 milliseconds. Now, if you recall earlier on, it took about 7,000 or 8,000 milliseconds to compile with everything loaded in. Now that we're only using what we need, you can see that the compiling is much quicker, which is really cool. So if we head over to our style sheet here now, you can see that instead of being 186,000 lines of style, it's only 656 because we're only using what we need within our HTML file here. Alright, now that we have the just-in-time mode enabled, let's add some additional classes here to our example markup and see what happens. So, for example, let's display this div here as flex, and we want this H1 to take up the majority of the space, so we'll define flex1. Now if we save this and head back over to the browser, you can see that yes, we do have flex and flex1 applied here, which are Tailwind styles, but nothing has happened to actually affect the styling of our div here. Now the reason why we're not seeing the change is because in our style sheet here, we don't have the flex and flex1 class because we didn't have them when we created or ran our build command. We added them after we did that. So if we go back to our terminal and we rerun that build command, we should see that we have flex and flex1 in here. All right, now this is pretty tedious that each time that we add some new classes to our HTML file that we have to run this build command, and we don't have to do that. There's an easier way we can look for changes and not have to rerun this build command manually. So what we're going to do is go into our package.json. Now we could just keep this build script right here and update it to actually look for change automatically, but I want to create a separate one in the event that you don't want to watch it, you just want to build it once. So I'll duplicate this down, and let's see here, we want to add a comma. That'll get rid of the error. And what we want to do here is instead of saying build tailwinds, we'll call this watch. And I spelled that wrong. All right. And then we want to keep the script the same. The only thing that we want to add is the watcher, which we can define by saying dash W here. All right. So now instead of running npm build tailwinds, we can say npm watch tailwinds here, and you can see now it's going to watch. So anytime we make a change to our HTML file here where we include a new class, it'll rebuild here. So for example, we don't have the text color of gray 400, so let's change this to 400 here, and you're going to see it's going to rebuild. And then if we go back over to our browser, we can see that if we hover over this right here, it's now using the class text gray 400, and it has a text gray 400 here inside of our style sheet. And since we are not using 500, it now removed that from our style sheet. So using the watcher is going to be a much more effective way to use the just-in-time mode to effectively add and remove classes from our style sheet here as we are updating our HTML file. Alright, so that's going to be all the setup we need to enable the just-in-time mode within our project. So let's begin to build out our landing page. So to begin, we'll remove this example markup as we no longer have need for it. Now, before we begin to implement the correct markup and the styling, I want to do some customization to our project inside of this Tailwind config file. So what we're going to do inside of here is add some custom colors. We're going to add a background image which we can use within our HTML file here for the hero section. We'll define a font family, and we're also going to do some customization to the container class. So to begin, what we'll do is we're going to add some custom colors. Now to add custom colors here within our project, what we want to do is inside of this theme object, we have this extend object. So we want to extend the color palette. Now I'm going to copy and paste this in. So we have a colors object here, and then we are defining all of these colors right here. Now where I'm getting these from is the starting files that are provided to us by Front End Mentor. They have a style guide that include these 4 colors right here. All right, now if you don't want to use these colors, feel free to define any color you want by using the method you're seeing right here, where we're going to have the name on the left followed by a colon and then the color. So I'm using HSL here, but you could use RGBA or just the hex value of the color you're looking for. All right. Now, the next thing we want to do is add a background image. So we'll define a background image object, and we'll give it a name. So since we're not going to be using any dashes here, we can just say hero without the quotes, followed by a colon. And then we want to define the path, and I forgot this should be in quotes, so we'll say URL. And we want to provide the destination or where this image is located at. So inside of here, we'll say /assets, and we'll do /bg and say header-desktop.png like this. All right, and that's going to be all the extending we're going to be doing. Now the next thing we want to do is add a custom font here. Now what we're going to do is actually use a Google font. So we'll head back over to our browser here, and I already have this pulled up. I believe it's called By-Jam-Juri. I probably butchered that, so I'm not going to even attempt that. So we're going to be using the regular 400 and the semi-bold 600. So what I'll do is copy this link tag here, and then we'll head back over to our project, and inside of the HTML file here, right above the style sheet, we'll include those link tags here. All right, now back inside of the Tailwind config, right below extend, we're going to define the font family object, and we're going to go ahead and give this a name. Now the name we're going to use is the name of the font family, so we'll say By Jam jury here. Hopefully that's right. And then we'll say by space jury. And then as a backup in case this isn't available, we'll say sans serif. All right. And then all we need to do inside of our HTML file once we get to populating it is use this font dash of the name right here. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. Now the last thing we're going to do is do some customization to our container class. So we'll define container here. And the first thing we're going to do is provide it the value of center and set this to true. Now what this does, if you recall, earlier on when we did our example markup, when I provided the container class, we had to use MX Auto to center it. Now applying the center here inside of the container object will automatically do that for us, and we don't have to provide that class anymore. Okay, and we're also going to provide some padding here on the left and right, so we'll say 1 rem. And then what I want to do is we're going to provide it we're going to mess with the breakpoints of the container. So by default, Tailwind applies max width to the container for different breakpoints. Now I want it to only get to a certain width. I don't want it to get any larger than 1440 pixels. So we'll define screen here, or screens. And then what we want to do is provide the breakpoint. So we're going to say large, and we'll set this to 1440 pixels. Then we'll go to XL, and we want this to get no larger than 1440 pixels. And then lastly here, we're going to say 2XL. So we got to pass this inside of quotes. And then we can say colon 1440 pixels. All right. And that's going to be all the customization we're going to be doing here inside of our Tailwind config. Okay, so let's begin to build our landing page. Now, what I have open here currently is our index.html file. Then I also have the content.html file, which has all the copy we're going to be needing for our landing page. And then also what I have here behind us is the index.html file opened up with that extension of live server. All right, so let's go back to the index.html here. And the first thing we're going to do is on the body, we want to apply that custom font family that we imported into our Tailwind config. Now to do this, we'll say font dash the name of the font that we gave it, which was this by Jamjury. Okay, now inside of this body tag, we're going to add a comment, and then we'll open up a div. And we're going to use that custom background image that we also apply within our Tailwind configuration. So we'll apply a class to this div, and we'll say BG, and we gave it the name of hero. All right, and we want to say BG cover, and also take up the full width, so we'll say W full. Now inside of this div, we're going to have another div, and we're going to apply a few classes here as well. The first one's going to be our container class. We want to display this div as flex, so we'll apply flex, and we want the flex direction to be a column, so we'll do flex col. And we want to align the items to the center, so we'll say item center. And then we want to apply some padding to the top and bottom. Now, here's where we're going to be using those arbitrary values that I mentioned earlier on in the video. So to do this, we're going to say py dash, and then we're going to use our bracket notation or our square bracket notation, and we're going to specify the specific pixel that we want, which in our case will be 80 pixels. Then what we're going to do is we're going to target a medium breakpoint here, and we're going to update the padding to be a little bit larger. So we'll do py dash and our square bracket notation, and we'll change this to 128 pixels. Then the next thing we want to apply to this class or this div is text center, like that. All right. So inside of this div, we're going to have the image on the very top, which will be our logo. And where we're going to get this from is our assets folder. And we're going to look for the logo.svg, which I believe here's at the very bottom. And there we go. Okay. And then for the alt tag here, we can just add clipboard logo like that. And then we want to apply some classes here to this image as well. So we're once again going to use arbitrary values, and we'll specify the width, and we want to customize this to be 125 pixels. Okay, and then we're going to apply some margin on the bottom, and we're going to use Tailwind's class here. So we're going to say margin bottom or MB-14. Okay, and that's going to be all we need for the image. Now below this, we're going to have our heading, and we'll apply a few classes here as well. So we'll say text for XL. Then on medium screens or higher, we want to increase this. So we'll say text, and we'll say 5XL. and we're going to apply some margin bottom on the, or we're going to do some margin on the bottom of 3, so we'll do MB3. And we're going to use one of our custom colors of dark gray blue. So we'll say text, and then we're going to do dark gray blue. Okay, and then for the copy here, what we'll do is we'll go over to this content.html file and just copy this right here. Okay, so if we save this, we can now see that our image generated, we have our logo, and we have the custom font. All right, so cool, everything is working good so far. So the next thing we want to add here is our paragraph tag for the subheading, and this will have a few classes. So we'll say max width, and once again we're going to use the arbitrary values, and we'll pass a square bracket, and we'll do 500 pixels. Now once we get to a slightly larger screen on the medium breakpoint, we want to update this. So we'll do max width, and we'll say 700 pixels here. Next up, we're going to do the text font size, and we could just say, I believe it's SM for a little smaller, but I just want to show you how we can use these arbitrary values. So for the text here, we're going to pass 14 pixels, and then on medium screens or higher, we'll say text, and we'll do our square bracket again and say 18 pixels. Okay, and then we're going to add a custom font color. We'll do text gray blue, and then we'll apply some margin on the bottom by saying MB16 like that. And then we'll head over to the content file here and copy this copy. That's a little bit of a tongue twister. So we'll paste this in like that, and there we go. So that's all looking great. Now the last thing we need to do is add our buttons here. So below this paragraph tag, we'll add another div, and we'll add some classes, and we'll do display flex. We want to do a flex cowl, and once we get to smaller screens or higher, we'll change this to a flex row. And then we'll apply some gap to separate the flex items by saying gap-4. Okay, so inside of here we'll have some button classes, and you know what, let's actually not duplicate that yet. So we'll add some classes on this button, and we'll say padding on the top and bottom of 3, so py3. Padding on the left and right, so we'll do px, and then we'll say -7. We want to round these, or round the corners, so we'll do rounded full. And we want to apply a nice box shadow, so we'll do shadow MD. And we want the text color to be white. And then for the background color on this one, we're going to use the strong cyan. So we'll say, let's see, strong cyan like that. And to have this be a little more readability, actually I think that's the last one we need, so I don't need to do that. Okay, so inside of this button we'll add the copy, and I can just go over here and copy this again, download iOS, and there we go. And since these buttons are going to be the same, we can just duplicate this down like this, and instead of saying BG strong cyan, we'll do our custom color of light blue, and then I believe it was for Mac here. We'll change that button to. Okay, there we go. So if we take a look at our page now, we have something like this. Alright, so we've already seen how we can use and implement one of the newer features that come along with the just-in-time mode, which is the arbitrary styles, which we've used here a few times already within our project. Now, if we head over to the documentation, one other feature that I do want to discuss are these element variants here, such as first letter, first line, and selection. Now, although we're not going to be actually utilizing these within our landing page, I still do want to cover them as a part of this crash course on the just-in-time mode. So let's head over to our markup and see how we can use these within our project. So let's use our paragraph tag here as an example, and let's begin with the selection variant. Now, to use a selection variant, it's very similar to how we use a breakpoint or a hover effect. What we want to do is we'll say selection here, and then we'll pass a colon, and then we want to apply the class that we want to have happen on the selection. So what we'll do here is we'll add a background color of our strong cyan. Alright, what we also want to do to make this a little bit more visible is let's add a text color of white to the text on selection as well. So we can define this again, and we'll do colon, and we'll say text white here. Alright, so if we save this and go back over to our browser with our project, now if we select any of this text within the paragraph here, we should see that the background should be a cyan and the color should be white. And there we go, pretty cool. Okay, so let's take a look at a few other variants that we can use. So let's remove our selection variant here, and we're going to take a look at one called first line. So on the first line, what we may want to do is bold all the fonts. So we'll say font bold like this, and if we save that and take a look, you can see that all of the text on the first line is now bolded. So pretty cool. And we can also use another variant in combination with this, where you don't have to use it in combination, but let's go ahead and use it. We can say first letter. So we'll do first, if I can type here, letter. And let's say we want to change the text color to our strong cyan color. So we'll say text dash strong cyan like this. And if we save it, we can see now the first letter of our paragraph tag here is that color of strong cyan. Okay, so that was only a few of the available variants that we have the ability to use when we implement the just-in-time mode. So definitely be sure to head over to the documentation and explore all the other variants that you have the ability to use while using this mode. Okay, so the buttons that we have here within our hero section are identically the same, besides the fact that the background color is different. Now, if we take a look inside of the button classes here, as I mentioned, we pretty much just copied and pasted these down, and they're sharing the same classes. Now, within this project, it's probably not too practical, or it's not really needed to have to create a global styling for these buttons, but I want to show you how we can do that while still using the Tailwind's classes. So what we can do is go over to our navigation here, and we can open up our style sheet, and we can actually create some button classes here. Now, we don't have to use CSS, we can still use the Tailwind classes. How we can do this is by using the apply directive here, and then we can come over to our HTML file, and we can copy the classes that we added here, and then we can paste them inside of this button class here. So we're going to be applying these classes to this button class here. So now, instead of writing this out here as we did twice, we can shorten this by saying button, and we can see that they still will be the same. So let's go ahead and update the second one as well, and we'll do button. All right, now we can even go as far to create a separate class for the color. So we can say BTN cyan and then BTN light blue. So let's do that as well. This may be overkill, but I just want to show you how we can do this. So we'll say BTN, and we'll do cyan, and we'll use the apply directive once more. And we're going to use our color of BG strong cyan like this. And then we'll do BTN dash light, and we'll do blue here. All right, and then we'll do the apply directive, and we'll say BG light blue. All right, so if we head back over to our HTML file here, we can say BTN instead of BG, and we can do this. All right, and as you can see, that one's not right. What did we do? Did we spell one of them wrong? Oh, it's strong cyan. We actually just called it cyan. So let's remove that, and there we go. Now, one other thing we can do to make it a little bit easier on ourselves to add a hover effect is come into the style sheet here and target the BTN cyan on hover and give it a cool box shadow effect. So we'll say BTN cyan, and we'll target the hover. And what I'll do is copy in this box shadow, as it is a little bit lengthy, and we're going to be using our custom color here, but we have adjusted the percentage, so that's why we're not going to be using the apply directive here. So now if we hover over our cyan one, you can see we have this nice little box shadow. And let's do the same here for the BTN light blue. So we'll target BTN light blue in its hover state, and then we'll add a similar box shadow but with its correct color here. All right, and if we save that, we should now be able to hover over both of our buttons and see that cool box shadow. And like I mentioned, this is probably not really necessary for a project this small, but I wanted to show you how we could use something like this to reduce the amount of classes that we apply to our button, especially with something like these buttons here where they use a lot of shared styling. Okay, next we're going to work on this feature section, which has a heading, and then below that we have a little subheader, and then beneath that we have a image on the left hand side here, and then the features of this product. So if we collapse this down, you'll see that what's going to happen is this will stack, and it's going to look something like this right here. All right, so let's expand this back a little bit, and inside of our markup, let's do a few line breaks, and we'll add a comment here for features. So we'll create a div and we'll apply a few classes. So we're going to say padding on the top and bottom, and we're going to use our square bracket notation here. And we're going to say 80 pixels. And then once we get to a medium screen, we're going to change that. So we'll do some padding on the top and bottom here, and we'll update this to 128 pixels. All right. And then we also want to apply the container class. And we want to restrict the max width of this div here. So by default, we have this container class on here, which has a max width based on the breakpoint. But what we want to do is make this get no larger than the max width of the screen of the large breakpoint. All right, so hopefully that makes sense what we're doing there. Now inside of here, we're going to have our heading. So we'll do an H2 and we'll apply some classes here. So we want to align this text to the center. We're going to give it the size of 3XL, and then once we get to a medium breakpoint, we'll increase this. So we'll do text 4XL, and we'll do some margin on the bottom. So we'll do MB3, and we'll say text dark gray and blue there for the color. And then to get the copy here, we can go to our content.html and grab this keep track of your snippets heading. So we'll paste that in here like that. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is create our paragraph tag, which is going to be the subheading, and we'll apply some classes here. So we'll do a max width, and we're going to do the arbitrary style value of 500 pixels. And then once we get to a medium breakpoint, we'll do the same thing. We'll update this to max width, and we'll say 700 pixels. Then we will align the text to the center. So we will say, if I can type, text center. And we want to center this, so we'll do MX Auto. And we also want to apply some font sizing. So we'll do text, and we'll use our arbitrary style values again, and say 14 pixels. And medium, we'll do text, and say 18 pixels. Now I do want to reiterate that I believe that these sizes already exist within the default classes that you can get from Tailwind, but like I mentioned, I just want to show you how you can use this for other things besides just positioning image absolute. You can use it for anything that takes in a pixel value here. Okay, so next up we will add the color here of text gray and say blue, and we'll do a margin bottom of, we'll say MB16 here. And then let's go over to this content file, and we'll grab this here, and we will paste this inside like that. Oops, wrong area. Let's remove that, and right there. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is create a div so we can display these two items here side by side. So we're going to have the image on the left hand side, or it'll be on the left and then on the top when we get down to a smaller screen size, and then we'll have the features on the right or on the bottom. So to display this in that fashion, we want to create a div, and we'll apply some classes here. So we'll say display flex, and then initially we'll have it as a flex column, and we'll position the items to the center on mobile or until we get to a higher breakpoint, and we'll pass the gap value of 10 here. Now, once we get to a large screen, we want to align the items to the start. We also want to target the large breakpoint here and change this to a flex row. And we'll do a line break here for some readability. And then once we get to the large breakpoint, we'll add a little bit larger gap, and we'll say 20. All right, now inside of here, we'll have another div, and we'll give this the class of flex1. Now inside of here, we're going to have our image. So since we want the image to take up the majority of the space of this layout here, we'll apply it the class of flex1. So we'll have our image tag, and then we can navigate to our assets folder here. And the image we're looking for is going to be this image computer.png. And we don't need to apply any classes here, but if you want to apply an alt attribute, we can just say computer. Okay, and that's going to be it for our image. Now below this, we're going to do another div, and we'll apply the class of flex, and I'll just do that so we can see this a little bit better visually. And we're going to do a flex column for the direction, and we'll do a margin on the top of 8 pixels, and we want to restrict the max width here of this div. So we'll say max-w and do our arbitrary style value and say 350 pixels like that. Okay, So inside of here, we're going to create a div for each one of these features. So we'll say div, and we'll apply some classes here. So what we want, or we're actually only going to apply one class here. We'll do margin bottom and do the value of 14 here to add some space between each one of these items here. All right, so inside of here, what we want to do is we're going to have an h3, and this will have the class or classes of text, dark, let's see, gray, blue, and we want to say text XL. And once we get to a small breakpoint, we will update the text size to be text-2XL like this. And then we'll apply some margin on the bottom here to separate this from the actual feature itself, because this will be the feature summary. So then what we want to do is go over to the content here, or the copy, and we will copy this first feature and we'll paste it inside of this H3. All right, there we go. Now below this, we'll have our paragraph tag, and we'll add some classes to this. So we'll do a class, and what we're going to say is text, and we'll use our arbitrary style value again. We'll do 14 pixels, and then once we get to a small breakpoint, we'll go back to the initial size, which we can declare using text base, which is 16 pixels. All right, and then the text color is going to be text gray, blue, and we're going to use the class of leading -7, which is going to be for the line height of this paragraph text. Okay, so let's head over to our content file and let's grab the content for this feature. All right, and let's paste it inside of here like that. So if we take a look at our browser here, you can see we currently have something like this. So what we want to do is duplicate this feature markup down 3 more times and replace it with the correct content. So what we'll do is we'll collapse this class here and just duplicate this down 1-2 more times. And then for the final one here, we don't need to add the margin bottom. So we'll remove that, and we don't need a class on here at all. So let's save this, and then inside of here, let's go over to our content. So the next one's going to be the iCloud sync, and we'll copy that and we'll paste it inside of here like that. And then we'll go back here and we'll grab the summary for this feature and we'll paste it in here. There we go. All right, and then the final one here, let's open this up and go back to our content, and we're going to say complete history, and we'll remove the quick search here, save that, and then lastly we need the summary. So let's copy this and let's paste it in there like that, and cool, there we go. We should be all set. So if we take a look now, we have something like this, and if we shrink it down to get a mobile view, we should see that once we get down to that breakpoint, this stacks and then everything goes to the center. All right, next we have this very simple section where we have a header, a subheader, and then this image. So back inside our HTML file, let's collapse this features div, and let's do a few line breaks, and we'll add a comment here for access. All right, so we'll open up a div and we'll add a few classes. So we're going to be doing the padding on the top and bottom, and we're going to use our square bracket notation here once again of 80 pixels. And then once we get to a medium breakpoint here, we'll do the padding on the top and bottom, and we'll change this to 128 pixels. Okay, then we'll apply our container class. Now a few things that we also want to do here is we want to display this as flex. We want the flex direction to be a column, and we want to align the items to the center here. All right, and then lastly, you want to do the same thing we did with our features div, is you want to restrict the max screen to the large breakpoint. Now I just realized that this may be a little confusing, because if we go over to our navigation here and into the Tailwind config, you can see that for the large breakpoint on our container, we configure this to be no larger than 1440 pixels. Now this is only for the container and not the default breakpoint that Tailwind has available to us in the styles. Okay, so I don't want you to get that confused with our container max width with this class right here. This is actually the Tailwind default breakpoint. We didn't change that. We only change up the breakpoint for the container class. Okay, so inside of here, we're going to add our heading and our paragraph tag. Now, since this is the same exact layout as our features, what we can do is just copy this H2 and this paragraph tag and then replace the content. All right, so let's copy this, and then inside of this div, we'll paste it in here. But what we want to do is get the correct copy. So we'll get this access clipboard anywhere heading, and we'll paste it inside of this H2. And then we'll save this, and let's remove this config file. We don't need it. And then let's grab the summary here. All right, and then we'll paste it in here like that. Now the last thing that we're missing is going to be our image. So right below our paragraph tag, we'll add our image, and the image we want is going to be the images-devices.png here. All right, and that's going to be it for the section. So if we take a look at our project here, if we now scroll down, you can see we have our heading, our summary, and then our image. Okay, next we have the section for supercharging your workflow. So this consists of a heading, then a little subheader here, and then we have this card section, which each card will have an icon, a heading, and then a little summary about that particular tool. All right, so let's switch browsers to our project here and then go over to our HTML file. And let's go beneath our axis div here and do a few line breaks, and we will say supercharge. Okay, and let's create a div. And we'll apply a few classes here. So we're going to do our padding on the top and bottom. So we'll say py and then use a square bracket notation here, and we'll say 80 pixels. And then once we get to a medium breakpoint, we'll update the padding to 128 pixels. Okay, and then we want to add our container class on here, and we also want to display this div as flex. We want the flex direction to be a column, so we'll say flex col, and we want all the items to the center. Okay, now inside of here, we're going to have our heading and our summary. Now we've already created this in multiple sections, so what we can do is go into our access div here and just copy and paste this H2 and paragraph tag into our supercharge section and save some time. And then what we want to do is go over to our content, and we want to grab the supercharge your workflow heading, and we'll paste it in here where it says access clipboard, and then we want to grab the little summary. All right, and there we go. Now the next thing we want to create is going to be the container for these cards here. All right, so let's go below our paragraph tag here and create a div. Now what we want to do is apply some classes here. So we're going to say display flex. Then we want the initial direction to be a flex column. Now once we get to a medium breakpoint, we want to convert this into a flex row, or not a flex column. Again, we'll say flex row for the direction. And then we want to apply some gap here to each one of our flex items. So we'll do gap -12. Now for each one of our cards, we're going to have a separate div, and we want to add some classes here. So we're going to say display flex on this as well. We're going to do a flex column. We want this to take up equal amounts of space for each one of our cards. So to do this, we'll say flex 1, and then we want to align the items to the center here. Okay. Now inside of this div, we're going to have an image. So where we want to grab this image from is going to be our assets, and we want to grab the blacklist image. So it's going to be icon-blacklist here, and then we can add an alt tag and do blacklist like that. Now we do want to add some classes here to restrict the width of this image, because it'll be quite big if we don't. So we'll use our arbitrary style, and we'll say W and our square brackets 44 pixels, and do a margin on the bottom. So we'll say MB and do 6. All right, so there we go. And if we want to just scroll over here, and we'll do a line break, and we'll add our heading. So we'll do an H3, and we'll add some classes here. So we'll do initially text LG for text large. And on a medium breakpoint, you want to update this to be text XL. Then the text color is going to be dark gray and blue. And we want to add a margin on the bottom of 3. And then what we'll do is go over to our copy here, and we want to grab the first heading, which is going to be for creating blacklist. And we'll paste it in there like that. And then below our H3, we'll have our paragraph tag. And the classes we want to apply here are going to be text SM initially. Then on a medium breakpoint, we will convert this back to the initial size, which will be 16 pixels. So to do this, we'll say text-base. And then we want the color to be gray, blue. And then we want the text to be aligned to the center. And we also want to restrict the max width on here to 350 pixels. So we'll say max W and do 350 pixels like that. And let's grab the copy for this one, which should be right here. So we'll copy this, and we'll paste it inside of this paragraph tag here. And that's going to be the general markup for each one of our cards. So if we go over to our browser and we take a look, we're left with something like this. So what we need to do now is add the additional 2 cards to fill out this section here. So let's go inside of this div and we'll collapse this and we'll duplicate this down one time. And then what we want to do is update all of the things inside of our card here. So obviously we don't want to do the same image. So this one's going to be, let's see here, I believe it's the icon dash text, and we'll just say text like that for the alt value. Then let's go over to our copy and grab this heading and we'll replace it with this one here. And then we want to grab the summary. All right, so there we go. And we'll paste that inside of here. Now let's go ahead and duplicate this down one more time to fill out this section. And let's do that. And we'll collapse that one back up here. And then for the last icon here, we want to grab, I believe it is the preview. So we'll do icon and we'll do preview like that. And then we'll change the alt value here to preview. And then let's go over to our copy file and grab the heading. And let's paste this in here. And then lastly, what we want to do is grab the summary. So there we go, and that should do it for the copy here. So let's take a look at it now inside of our browser, and we should be left with something like this. And if we collapse it here to mobile, we should see it stack on that median breakpoint, and then we get something that looks like this. All right, next we have this section which is going to list out all the clients that are currently using this product. So we're going to be building something like this. So let's switch back over to our project in the browser and then go back to our HTML file here. And let's begin by collapsing this div. And let's do a few line breaks and we'll add a new comment for clients. And let's create our div here. So we'll apply some classes. So first off, we'll do our padding on the top and bottom initially for 80 pixels. And then once we get to a median breakpoint, we'll update the padding to 128 pixels as we've been doing. We want to display this div as flex. We want to apply some gap between each one of our items to be gap 20. We want to set the flex direction to a column, so we'll say flex col. And then once we get to a small breakpoint, we'll set the flex direction to a row. And then for some readability here, I'll skip to the next line. We want to set the wrap here to flex wrap so that when the image inside of this div runs out of room, it'll go to the next line. Okay, and then we'll align all the items to the center. So we'll say item center, and we'll also do justify center to justify everything to the center as well. Okay, and then we also want to apply our container class. Now inside of this div, all we're going to do is add the images for each one of the clients. So first off, we'll look into our assets folder here, and we're going to grab the Google logo. Okay, and then I'll just duplicate this down and we'll say logo. It's not going to pop up for me now. Logo, and then we want the IBM next. So we'll save that, and then we'll copy this down once more. Then the next one's going to be the Microsoft, which I think should pop up there. So there we go. And then we have the HP. So we'll do HP. And then lastly, we have our vector graphics one. So we'll duplicate this down one more time and we'll say vector graphics. And that's all we need to do for this section. So if we save it, we should be able to go to our browser here and see we have this, which we did something wrong. So I'm assuming I spelled something which is justify wrong. So let's spell this right. Okay, and that should push it all to the center, and then we have something like this. Now, what happens when we collapse our screen here is that once one runs out of room, it's going to go to the next line, and it'll be in the center, and it'll continue to do that till we get to the breakpoint we set for the small, which then at that point, it should go into a column like you're going to see right here. Okay, next we have our call to action section here, which we have our heading and then our summary and then our 2 call to action buttons. All right, so let's switch back over to the tab for our project we're working on and then go back to our HTML file. So below our clients, we'll do a few line breaks and we'll add the comment for CTA, and then we'll create a div and we'll apply some classes here. So we'll add our padding on the top and bottom initially of 80 pixels. And then once we get to our median breakpoint, we'll add the padding on the top and bottom to 128 pixels. All right, then we'll apply our container class. We want to display this as flex. We want the flex direction to be a column, and then we want to push all the items to the center here. And we also want to align the text to the center, so we'll say text center like that. Now inside of here, we're going to have our heading, which is our H2, and our paragraph tag, which we've already created those in multiple sections. So let's go to our supercharged section and let's grab the paragraph and the H2 tag here. And then we'll collapse this and we'll paste it inside of here. But what we want to do is replace the copy. So let's go over to our content.html and we'll grab this here. And then what we want to do is replace it in this side of this H2. And then we want to grab the summary, which we'll replace inside of our paragraph tag here. Now for the buttons, we've already created the same exact markup inside of our hero section. So what we can do is just grab that markup from our hero section right up here. And we can just expand this, and we want to copy this entire div, and then we'll recollapse this to save some space, and then we can paste it right below our paragraph tag, and that's all we need to do. So if we head over to our browser and we scroll down, we should be left with something like this, and if we collapse it, it should stack as it does inside of the hero. Alright, to wrap things up, we need to create our footer here. Alright, so let's head over to our HTML file, and let's go below our CTA and do a few line breaks, and we'll add the comment of footer. Now to create our footer, we'll use the footer tag, and we'll apply a few classes. So we'll say BG for the background color, and we'll do gray, and the value 100. Now we'll add some padding on the top and bottom, so we'll say PY10, and then padding on the left and right, we'll do PX12. And then inside of here, we'll have a div, and we'll apply some classes. So we want to contain everything, so we'll say container for our first class. Then we want to display this as flex. We want the direction to be a flex column. And then at the medium breakpoint, we want to convert this to a flex row. And then we want to align all the items to the center here. And then, so when we're on desktop, we're going to have columns. So we want to have some spacing in between those columns. So we'll say gap -x-24. Now on mobile, we're going to have rows. Now in between those rows, we want to have some space. We can target that with the gap-y, and then we'll apply the value of 12 here. All right. Now within this div, or this contain div, we're going to have three children element. We're going to have the logo, the navigation, and then our socials here. All right, so let's first start off with our div for the image. So we're not going to have any classes on here, but we'll add the image tag inside of this div. And the source you want to go into is the assets folder and our logo.svg. And then for the alt tag, we'll just say logo. Now for the classes we want to apply, we're going to say width, and we're going to use our square bracket notation, and we'll do 55 pixels. All right, and that's all we need to do for our image. Now next up we have our navigation, and we'll be using a UL tag here, and we'll apply some classes. So we'll display this as flex. We'll add the class of flex1. We want to make sure this wraps once you run out of space, so to do that we'll say flex wrap. We want the space in between the columns to be 12, so we'll say gap x12, and the space in between each row we'll do gap y, and we'll say 4. And what we want to do next is we're going to apply the justify to the center. So we'll say justify center here. And then to add some readability, I'll go to the next line. And on the medium breakpoint, we'll say justify start. Let's see here. There we go. And dash start like that. And then we'll add a text color here to all the all the LI items inside of our UL here of text, dark, gray, blue. All right, and to save some time, I'll copy and paste all these LIs in. They can be found inside of the copy file here, but just to save some time and I have to type all that out, I'll paste these in here. So we have our LI tag. We're applying the class of cursor pointer, so when we hover over these, they have the cursor pointer, and then we have all of the items here, which can be found right here inside of the copy. All right. And then the last thing we need to do is create the markup for our social. So once again, we'll use a UL. We'll apply some classes. We'll say display flex. We want to set the flex wrap on here as well. And we want to justify this to the n. So we'll say justify -n. We want to say items to the center, so item center. And then we'll apply some gap in between each column by saying gap x4. All right, now inside of here, we'll have our LI tag, and we'll apply the class of cursor pointer. All right, now inside of each one of our LI tags here, we're going to have our image for the social media icon. So the first one, we'll go into our assets folder here, and we want to grab the Facebook. So I believe it should be at the very top here. There we go. And we don't need to do any classes on our image. And then what I'll do is I'll duplicate these down 2 more times. Okay. And then what we can do here is we can say Facebook for the alt. And then the next one we want to add is going to be Twitter. So we'll do dash Twitter. And then for the alt, we'll add Twitter here. All right. And then the last one we have is going to be for Instagram. So we'll remove Facebook and we'll say Instagram, and we'll add it here to the alt tag as well. All right, there we go. So that's going to be all the markup for our footer. So we'll go ahead and collapse all this here. And let's head over to our browser or the tab for our project, and we can see we're left with something like this. And if we collapse it, you can see that once it gets to a certain breakpoint, it'll go ahead and convert into a column, which it is like this. And once it runs out of space on this row, it will collapse, and you can see that they'll go to the next line and they'll all be aligned to the center. Okay everyone, that's going to wrap it up for our modern landing page using the Tailwind Just-in-Time Mode. So if we click on Inspect here within our browser on the finished version, and we head over to the Network tab, and we do a refresh here, we can see if we go to our style sheet that the final size was only 15 KB, where the original file size of our style sheet was over 4 megabytes when we weren't using the just-in-time mode. So you're definitely going to see a heavy improvement for performance when using this feature or mode. All right, so hopefully you guys did enjoy it. If you guys did, I would really appreciate you guys leaving a like down below and subscribing for more content like this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.